Everyone in the Blackmore kingdom knew the name Cael Blackmore. They knew his face, his height, his broad shoulders, and the quiet way he walked through the palace halls. They knew he was the firstborn son of King Aldric Blackmore, the most powerful alpha ruler in 7 territories. But the thing people remembered most about Cael, the thing they whispered about behind closed doors and lowered eyes, was not anything great or proud. It was the fact that he had no wolf. In a kingdom where a wolf was everything, where your rank, your respect, and your very right to stand tall depended on the beast living inside you, Cael had nothing. No inner howl, no shift, no golden eyes that flickered when emotion ran high. He was 23 years old, and the wolf that should have come in his early teenage years had simply never arrived. Nobody spoke about it directly to his face. They didn't need to. The silence said it all. When the royal court gathered, Cael sat at the table, but was never asked to speak. When warriors trained in the yard, Cael was allowed to join, but was never truly included. When his younger brother Daren laughed a little too loudly at dinner, glancing just long enough at Cael to make his meaning clear, no one told him to stop. King Aldric never publicly said a word against his firstborn son, but he also never defended him, and in a royal palace, silence from a powerful man can be its own kind of punishment. Cael had learned to live inside that punishment. He woke early, trained alone, read late into the night, and kept his feelings tucked so far inside himself that sometimes he wondered if he had any left. He was not angry. He was not sad in the way that people cried about. He was simply quiet, the way a place is quiet after something important has already ended. That was his life. Until the morning Lena Voss arrived. She came on a cold Tuesday, when frost still sat on the palace windows, and the pine trees outside were dark against a pale sky. She was the new maid assigned to the East Wing, the part of the palace where Cael lived, which most of the staff quietly tried to avoid. Nobody wanted to serve the Wolfless prince. It felt unlucky to them, like standing next to a candle that had already gone out. Lena was small and moved carefully. Her hair was dark honey-colored and always tied back in a neat knot. She wore the simple gray uniform of palace staff and kept her eyes respectfully lowered, the way young women of Omega rank had been taught from childhood. She did not say much, and she did not try to be noticed. On her first morning, she entered Cael's private study to clean. He was standing at the window with his back to the door, watching his brother train with the royal guards in the yard below. He heard the door open and stiffened, already prepared for what always came next. The quick glance from new staff, the search for his wolf aura, the almost invisible flinch when they found nothing. But Lena did not flinch. She looked at him once, gave a calm and honest nod, and began her work without a word of discomfort. Cael stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Then he walked out of the room and spent the rest of that day thinking about a nod. It was such a small thing, but small things, when a person has been starved of them, can feel enormous. The weeks that followed, built on that first morning, the way a river builds, slowly, quietly, and without making any announcement about where it is going. Lena came each day and did her work, with a kind of careful attention that Cael noticed before he meant to. She placed his tea exactly where his hand would naturally reach, without him looking. She cracked the window open on warm mornings before he thought to ask. She returned books to the shelf with dried leaves tucked inside the pages she found interesting, not as a message, just as a habit, the way a thoughtful person moves through the world. He started staying in the study when she arrived instead of leaving. They began talking in the way that cautious people do, one small sentence at a time, with long, comfortable spaces between them. She asked him about the books he read. He asked her where she came from. She said a small village on the outer edge of the kingdom. He said he had never been to the outer villages. She said that was something he should change someday. It was the most natural conversation Cael had experienced in years, and the fact that it was natural made it feel almost strange. One morning, without any cruelty in her voice, she asked him what it felt like to live in a house full of wolves when he could not shift. He was quiet for a long time. The question did not offend him. What surprised him was that no one had ever asked it before, not with genuine curiosity, and not without an edge of pity or judgment underneath. He told her the truth. He said it felt like being a word that everyone could see but no one could read. Lena was quiet too for a moment. Then she said, "Maybe they are reading the wrong language." He did not answer right away. He looked at her, and she looked back at him with the same steady calm she always carried. Then she went back to her work, and he went back to his book, and neither of them said anything else for a while. But that sentence stayed with him like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples kept going long after the surface looked smooth again. 6 weeks after Lena arrived, the palace held its annual blood moon ceremony. It was one of the most important events in the kingdom's calendar. Every pack member gathered in the Great Hall to reaffirm their wolf bonds and honor the alpha bloodline. It was loud and full of pride, the kind of event that made the walls feel as though they were breathing. For the 3rd year in a row, Cael was quietly excused from attending. The king's advisors called it a matter of protocol. Cael knew it for what it was: another gentle removal, another soft erasure. That night, while the rest of the palace celebrated, Cael sat alone in his study. He was not reading. He was not doing anything at all, really. He was just sitting in the particular kind of stillness that belongs to someone who has practiced being invisible for so long that it has become their default setting. He did not expect to hear a knock at the door. He did not expect it to be Lena. She was not scheduled to work that evening. The non-essential staff had been given the night off, yet there she was at his door, holding a small lantern, still in her gray uniform, with an expression on her face that he had not seen directed at him in a very long time. It was concern. Simple, genuine, unpracticed concern. He asked her why she was there. She said she had been thinking about something for a long time and had decided that tonight was the right night to say it. He stepped back from the doorway. She came in and sat across from him, the lantern on the table between them. Outside, he could hear the faint sounds of howling from the great hall, beautiful and ancient, and completely foreign to the room they sat in. She took a slow breath and began to speak. She told him that she had known his mother, not stories about her, not rumors or palace legends. She had known Queen Marin Blackmore personally, or as personally as a child of 7 could know a queen. Lena's own mother had worked in the outer chambers of the royal family when Lena was very small, and Lena had been brought along because there was no one else to care for her. In those weeks of working near the queen, Lena had seen things that a child her age was not meant to see, and heard things she was not meant to hear. Queen Marin, in the last weeks of her life, had been deeply troubled by the healer's verdict about Cael, that he would never shift, that he had simply been born without a wolf. The queen had refused to accept that answer. She was a quiet woman, but she was not a weak one, and she had quietly sought out a spirit walker, an old and almost forgotten kind of mystic, wolf-born, who could read the threads of a person's soul and bloodline. The spirit walker had come to the palace in secret. Lena had been sitting behind a heavy curtain in the outer chamber, small and still and mostly forgotten, when the spirit walker spoke. And what the spirit walker said had nothing to do with absence or defect or brokenness. The spirit walker told Queen Marin that her son had not been born without a wolf. He had been born with something far rarer, a soul-bond wolf, a spirit creature of such deep and ancient power that it could not emerge in the ordinary way. It did not answer dominance. It did not respond to force, or to rank, or to the pressure of moon cycles and pack rituals. It was not asleep because something was wrong with Cael. It was waiting for one specific thing that the palace, for all its gold and power and tradition, had never once truly offered him. It was waiting to be chosen, not commanded, not impressed by strength or title, simply chosen, freely, honestly, by someone who saw him as he was, and stayed anyway. The queen had wept when she heard this, not from sadness, but from the kind of relief that comes when something you hoped was true turns out to actually be true. She had made a plan to protect this knowledge, to find the right moment to tell Cael when he was older, because she understood what the court would do if word spread that the Alpha King's firstborn son carried a wolf that was immune to every power structure in the kingdom. It would terrify them, and frightened, powerful people are dangerous. But she had died before that moment came, and the Spirit Walker's words, King Aldric had made sure of it, were buried along with her. Lena had been 7 years old, behind a curtain, too young to be taken seriously, and too forgotten to be worried about. She had carried those words for 16 years. Every time she thought about saying something, she remembered that she was an Omega Maid with no title and no rank. and that no one asks Omega children what they know. But she had thought about Cael every time the memory surfaced. She had thought about a boy growing up in a palace that had decided he was broken, when the truth was that he was something the palace simply did not have the capacity to understand. She looked at him across the lantern light and said, "I think your mother would have wanted someone to tell you eventually. I think she would be glad it was now." Cael did not speak for a long time after she finished. He sat very still, the way he always did, but there was something different about his stillness this time. It was not the stillness of someone making themselves small. It was the stillness of something that had been held in for a very long time, finally deciding to let go. He looked at Lena, not past her, not around her, at her, with the full and unhurried attention of a man who had spent his whole life being looked through, and was only now learning what it meant to look back. Something changed in the room. The lantern flame went perfectly still, as though the air itself had paused to pay attention. A low warmth spread through the walls, through the floorboards, through the very air between them. Not a sound, not a sight, but a feeling, deep and old and enormous, like the first note of a song that had been waiting a very long time to be played. And then, for the first time in his 23 years of life, Cael Blackmore shifted. It did not happen with violence or explosion. It did not come crashing out of him the way the palace had always believed wolf emergence worked, with force and dominance and noise. It came the way dawn comes over still water, gradually, and then all at once. A great silver wolf stood where the man had been, larger than anything the Blackmore bloodline had produced in living memory, with eyes that carried a quiet, ancient light. Lena did not move away. She sat exactly where she was, hands folded in her lap, and looked at the wolf with the same calm and direct gaze she had always given the man. The wolf stepped forward slowly. It lowered its enormous head and rested it gently beside her hands. That was how they were found, minutes later, when the resonance of something rare and powerful rolled through the palace walls and drew every wolf in the building to the east wing. The king's firstborn son, no longer the wolfless prince, resting beside an Omega maid who had done nothing more and nothing less than tell him the truth and stay. The days that followed were not simple. They never are, when a truth that was meant to stay buried comes up into the light. King Aldric was forced to face what he had done, suppressing the Spirit Walker's words, allowing his son to grow up believing he was less than nothing, when the reality was that Cael carried something the kingdom had never seen. The court fractured, loyalties shifted, old alliances were questioned. Daren, to his credit, said very little. He looked at his brother for a long, honest moment, and then he nodded. It was the most real thing that had ever passed between them. Cael did not take the throne that week or that month. There was too much to work through, too many years of silence to address, too many people who deserved honest answers. He moved through those difficult days steadily, without rushing, the way someone moves who has finally stopped pretending the ground beneath them does not exist. And Lena kept the east wing. She kept the mornings, and the tea placed exactly where it should be, and the dried leaves tucked into pages she found worth remembering. In the quiet evenings, when the palace had settled and the world outside had grown dark and still, they sat together in that study and talked, simply, freely, the way two people talk when they have finally found someone worth being honest with. Nobody had sent Lena to that wing to change anything. She had simply shown up, done her work with dignity, and told the truth when it mattered most. And that, in the end, was the only thing that had ever been needed.